Welcome, everyone. We'll give people a minute or so to join, and we're going to talk about employee listening, sentiment analysis. Um, and I am joined again today with my co-host, Jim Wysella, co-founder of Reagan Consulting Group. Nice to see you again, Jim.
Good to see you, Michael. It's nice to be on here again, and we got a lot to talk about again today. I'm excited about this one.
All right, fun stuff. And just so everyone knows, we do have a recording, so you will get a copy of it. And if for those who signed up and did not attend, you'll also be able to watch it later. Um, the We'll also send you the results of our employee engagement survey guide, and everyone's muted to start, but we're happy to take questions. You can press up at the top the little Q&A button and put in your question, and we'll try to address it as we go through. So welcome to ask whatever you like, and we'll see if Jim and I can come up with an answer.
Right.
All right. And so today's topic, employee listening, and we've got a little survey to see how people are actually going about it now. So there's lots of options, but the idea, of course, isn't quite the same. Although this works too, sitting down with a employee and having a discussion, that's always helpful. But what we really mean when we talk about employee listening is just trying to get an aggregate sense of what's going on. Most companies, I think our Polite Mail's average customer size is like 25,000 employees. I mean, I have a hard enough time with 100. It's difficult to imagine dealing with that many, but generally you want to get a sense of by department or division, various segments, how people are feeling about various topics, and then understanding that, you can actually know what needs to be communicated.
Yeah, and it's good that these new tools, the sentiment analysis we're going to be talking about today, are a perfect complement to the traditional and still very useful tools of surveys and focus groups. So it's the kind of the complete package to get close enough to hear what's going on, to spot trends, to solve problems, to sort of get ahead of communication needs. So it's a nice combination.
All right. In
Okay, look at
surveys, that
this.
that traditional approach is the way it's done, right?
Well, a lot of people are still, and I'm glad because we do this work all the time in our communications audits. Surveys and focus groups and interviews are really an important part of that. But we're adding, in our work and in our work with Polite Mail, we want to add the sentiment analysis, which you can see here, Michael, is very new for everybody. They're not doing it yet. It's brand new.
Yeah.
Um, so, and then there were three people out there who don't measure. We're gonna have to find those people and talk to
Well, they still might do it. They might just not put metrics to it, right? They probably like even the older fashioned way, right? You run around the office or talk to people and
them. Right,
get
right.
kind of what's the temperature? It's a
What's the temperature?
little
Yeah,
less exact.
and frankly, talking to people is a good way of, the old school talking to people. You learn a lot.
Yeah,
All right.
that's the basis. All right, so let's jump into it. Of course, my like last time, my forward and back button do not want to cooperate, so we'll do the click. All right, so a lot of text here, but basically trying to put some definition around how do you listen to this? What's the voice of the employee? Obviously, it's broader, but essentially you want to have a system to do it and to do it in aggregate, so you can kind of compile that up and kind of say, like, 40% of the employees are feeling this way. And you also need to do it in a way that employees, feel like it's trusted, right? They want to be able to express their opinions and not feel like someone's going to come down on them because of it. Because you just won't get honest answers if there's any feeling like, if they have to look over their shoulder, right? And then you want that culture, and the big thing of establishing the culture isn't just asking the questions, it's actually doing something about it, right? People need to see that action has been taken based on my input. And most people, myself included, like that feels good, right? You provide some feedback and something changes as a result, then that's good forward progress.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're always telling folks, okay, well, gosh, we took a survey, we got great response, we did focus groups. We got to report back to the participants because they want to know. Okay, well, I did all of that. What'd you find out?
Right.
Share that with me. And when you do, that also these are kind of building blocks, that builds more trust. Um, and it's part of that process that allows us to identify changes that we can make to improve communications.
And I think it probably encourages people to continue filling out the surveys, right? Answering the surveys. They see something's actually happening.
Right.
All right. And when we're using the AI tools, now, AI kind of burst on the scene with Chat GDP, uh, does some writing and some summarizing and editing. All that stuff's pretty cool and interesting. Although sometimes the results can be a little questionable. But the other thing AI can do pretty well is analyze words. It's kind of part of that natural language processing. So it's not doing the actual word construction, but it's taking apart the word choice and assigning values to it, kind of based on uh, what emotions might be, when those words are used most often to express things. Then it can determine a sentiment score based on, are these words positive, negative, neutral? And as a result of that, you can kind of do what's called opinion mining, which is you evaluate a set of that data and you can kind of sense, like, okay, if it's mostly negative, are people feeling angry or sad? Or if it's mostly positive, are they excited, happy? So you can kind of extract those emotions and opinions out of a set of text, and that's what gives you your sentiment analysis and an opinion mining on a more automated fashion. But you do need uh, a certain size data. You need enough data to make it useful.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael, I'm as a writer and editor for many years, um, I'm, naturally kind of skeptical of AI as a writing tool. Like the first item here. And I think because AI has hallucinations from time to time, and particularly with word choice, because AI is drawing on what's available to it to look at. So, when it comes to you know, the word choices, I think, that's why communicators and writers will continue to be employed. But what I really love are the next two things because analyzing those choices, engaging that sentiment in an aggregate fashion, I think that's a great use of AI.
Yeah, and you can tell. You get the sales pitches in your email box, and you can kind of tell when it's written by AI, because like, yeah, no one writes like that. Like,
Right.
someone wrote something like that, but not constructed the
But
same way. So
but
it's
not
still,
quite, right.
yeah,
It's
it's
just
still
a
it's still
little
a
bit
little
off.
obvious. Yeah, a little obvious
Yeah,
and painful.
right.
All right. Well, the big benefit is the with the whole work from home movement. Everyone kind of jumped on Teams and video calls like this one, and chat responses with Teams, Engage, Slack, those types of tools. Now there's a whole plethora of that conversational data that could be analyzed in kind of I call it kind of like the modern water cooler, right? People can chat back and forth and express opinions, and that's going to give you a whole wealth of information that the sentiment analysis can uh, run calculations against. Uh, Email and internet, while it's still the most popular communication tools, those tend to be one directional, right? So you're not going to get a great sentiment analysis. You can get a sentiment analysis on what you're sending, right? So am I sending out positive vibes or negative vibes here? But it's not going to give you that feedback mechanism. So it's really that the conversation part of it is going to give you the insights into things like, areas of concern. There's, is there a conflict going on here? How are people feeling about various topics? All of that can be extracted out.
Right.
All right. Now, the other thing you can do with this beyond just the sentiment analysis, and one of the challenges with teams, even in our relatively small company, right? I think we have more unused Teams channels than actual active ones. Because they get spun up, they get used for a short period of time or a project, then they're just left there, and it becomes kind of a noisy environment. So I can only imagine in a 20,000 person company or even several thousand, how noisy that could get. But what the analysis can do is look at those teams and channels and evaluate, what's the recency and frequency and volumes in these over time. Are people, do you have more members, less members, are participation going up or down? And this will allow you to kind of run an audit against those teams and help potentially reduce some of that noise.
Yeah, and this last point here, I think, is really important about employee privacy. They're even in the best, companies where communication is solid and you get, decent engagement scores. People are, naturally a little skeptical. There's a sort of a big brother mentality about some of this stuff, who's looking over your shoulder. So the fact that we're monitoring conversations, I think you have to be absolutely clear and transparent, Michael, about this with people and let them know, why are we doing it? Well, we're doing it like we use these other tools. We're trying to understand the opinions and the concerns of our employees so that we can improve the entire employee experience. That's why we're doing it. We're not doing it to keep tabs on what people are saying or to kind of micromanage. But I think you have to be absolutely clear about that. You have to write about that transparency. You got to, in your communications, tell people what you're doing and tell them why.
Yeah, it's interesting. Been the number one concern in the Comlytics beta that we have out now. The one of the things that can identify is like who are your influencers, right? Who are the employees with the biggest reach, and then it can also evaluate uh, detractors and companies would look at that and go, well, okay, wait a minute, maybe we don't want to be having a list of people that are on the saying negative things versus positive things. Like we don't mind to know who the influences are, but maybe we need to mask some of this stuff so people don't think we're going to single them out.
Yeah.
All right. And the value of listening, I think that's the kind of the third element here. The real value is, in companies that outperform the markets. When they survey those employees, 88% of them feel like they're being heard, right? So that being heard translates into financial performance. So you got to start with the listening and then taking action to get there. Most 25% of the workplace think that's an important aspect, more than their training, uh, but only 10% feel like their voice is being heard. So there's definitely room for improvement, and definitely rewards for doing it right. And then a whole list of benefits here. We don't have to go through all of them. The one thing that I've noticed in our use of the sentiment analysis is just getting ahead of things before they get worse, right? It's kind of that, bad news travels faster than good news, the water cooler effect, or the messaging can get exaggerated in different directions, and knowing that that's happening and kind of seeing what directions things are going allows you as a communicator get out in front of it, right? Like, oh, we need to change the narrative a little bit, or we got to show people the positives. We need to talk more about the plus side, not let them dwell on the negative side. So it definitely gives you the ability to see where things are going and then take corrective action, rather than waiting until it's too late.
Yeah, I think that's an important one. I'm drawn to the two at the top of the right-hand column, measuring the impact of initiatives, because we see a lot of this. We see companies have, big time initiatives that are really important to the leadership, but they have not been really sufficiently translated to for the for the employee audience. Sometimes they're too high level, they can be very convoluted, they can use a lot of jargon. And one of the things we're always trying to measure is are these initiatives, is the message getting through? Is there some level of understanding? And then the identifying training needs is something I think really applies to managers who we find, often are, charged with being good communicators in addition to managing their operations as like a whole nother job they have. And often they're ill prepared or they want they want help. We find that they really want help quite a bit. So identify identifying the needs for that kind of training, um, really important.
Yeah, that's interesting too, because I know in a lot of our clients, the senior executives will have a communicator basically, dedicated to working with them, writing their stuff, editing their stuff, helping them push stuff out. But that middleman management tends to not get quite the same attention, does it?
Right. A lot of things get stuck in the middle. And that's why, you use let's start with sort of the traditional tools. I say traditional as if, they should be going away. I don't mean that. These are tried and true measurement tools. We use them every time we do a communications audit, either internal or external. We use them for both. And but there are sort of tricks of the trade on these things, particularly if you're doing it yourself. On the survey front, been a lot of changes over the years. We used to do these, companies used to do these really long surveys
The
once
big
a year.
annual engagement survey.
Yeah, the big annual engagement survey, which nobody wants to take, and takes a long time to complete, and people start to fall off at the end of it. Um, that sort of thing. You gotta, you want to ask the right kinds of questions so that you're clear about what you're asking and what you're trying to learn. It's not just a bunch of questions. You go in with a plan to say, here's what I think is going on. Here's what I really want to measure. Um, and of course, as we said, you got to report back. Here's what the survey found. There are always, I've yet to do a survey, and I've done a lot of them that didn't find something that was surprising, good or bad.
Right.
And I think people want to know that, and then they want to see you actually do something with it. Um, you know,
At minimum, tell them the results, right? Like show me how everything ended up.
right. And then when you do make changes, you can always remind them that, part of this came from their own feedback about what needed to change. Because the classic, here's the classic thing that we find in so many of our surveys, when we're, trying to understand, for example, how do people feel about the strategic plan? Companies are always rolling out strategic plans, a lot of fanfare, balloons, ice cream social, whatever. Here's our strategic plan for the next 5 years. Um, Fortunately, many of them have stopped doing the 5 year plan because 5 years is an eternity. As some, in such a volatile world. But they announce them with great fanfare. So when we ask them, "Are you aware of it?" the response is quite high. Yeah, I'm aware of it. I went to the town hall, or I saw the poster, or you know, they get there's a, they come out with a big bang. And then we ask them, "Well, do you understand it?" And right there, you already lose 15 points of people saying, "Well, kinda, but not really." Or there are parts of it I get and parts of it I don't. Again, That 15-point gap, that's where communicators come in. We have to explain that, got to translate. And then the worst part is the last one, which when we say, well, do you understand how what you do at this organization contributes to the strategic plan? And there it just falls off the table. That's, a 30-point drop. And this is from an actual survey. But we see variations on this, all the time. I'm aware of it. I kind of get it. I don't have any idea what it has to do with me or how I contribute to it. And of course, the essence of engagement, and I think, is people feeling like they are playing a role in the success of the organization. And if they
Right,
don't know how they fit in, there's a problem.
right. Well, this one, 50%, I mean, that's not terrible, right? Could be a lot worse.
Could be a lot worse.
So at least half the
So on the
people know.
Yeah, so on the survey, when you're looking at survey data, there's just a few things to keep in mind because people will say, well, X percent agree with this. This is great. But this is why we like to use the 5-point Likert scale because I want to know who's on the fence. I mean, it's anonymous. You would think that nobody would be on the fence. Not like we can track you down. But as it turns out, after many focus groups following up on this sort of thing, we find out that people click neutral because they're not in the camp of, well, I don't hate it, I don't disagree, so I'm not going to go there. But I'm not sure I'm that keen on it either. I'm just on the fence. And we want to know that because we think that neutral means that there's opportunity to move those people over to the positive side of the ledger. And in this particular survey result, we could certainly use that to happen because even when you combine strongly agree and agree, you're only at 39% of people who agree with what you're asking them. And you have 30% that disagree. 30% is high. If those disagreements go higher, any higher than 20%, we raise the flag because that's too many people.
So when you
Um,
add those two orange ones together, 20% is kind of the threshold you look for.
yeah, when we add them together, 20%, and 20% is cause for some concern. Well, there's always going to be some people who don't like anything, and we call them the lunatic fringe. They're against everything. Okay, that might be 5 or 10%. And then there's some people who are thinking, no, I don't agree with that, and that's legitimate. But once you start to get, close to a third of the population taking the survey, disagreeing, we've got troubles. And again, just to sort of emphasize, the way to look at data is that you have to, is your data underwater, meaning are your positive numbers um, less than 50% and less than, obviously the combination of the neutrals and the disagrees. So when we ask, you know, are the various channels working together in a well coordinated way? These were not good results. We have, very small 30% saying, yeah, they are. And a lot of people saying they're not, and a whole bunch of folks in the middle saying, I don't know. That's not good because, your comms channels need to work together. Um, And the second graph is you actually have to know what they're for. When you get this newsletter, do you know what's in it? When you go to the intranet homepage, do you know what do you expect to find there? These numbers are also underwater with very high negatives. So, here's a problem, and you can solve that problem. This identifies the problem, I think, quite well. And the main thing for people as well is they want to know what do I need to know versus what is nice to know? Because that's going to help them determine when they look at things. They want to see stuff, the immediate needs. What do I have to do? What do I need to know? What's happening today and tomorrow? that's one set of communication, but there's too much mix between that and nice to know, which by the way, I might want to know it, but I can look at that more on at my leisure.
Right.
And then the
Yeah,
last
those
one there,
charts at
it
the
says,
bottom are interesting because the work from home stuff, the communication seems to be working pretty well.
yeah, I mean it's a real indication of the of that hybrid work, remote and hybrid work, that people are feeling very connected, in part because they're where are they? They're at home sitting in front of a computer. So, our emphasis on digital communication means that these people, we can reach them just about any time. The people who are on the job, who have to be on site, have always been harder to reach, and that has really been revealed in this work that we've done during the pandemic and in the post-pandemic period we're in. Is that these people are really hard to reach, and they're um, and but they have to be there. If you're a nurse, you can't do that from home. If you're making a car, you can't do that from home. So, if you're a salesperson, and you're on the road visiting, clients, you can't do that from your living room. So it's important to get a sense of how we connect with these people and how we can improve that, because sometimes it takes different methods to
Right.
communicate with those folks than it does for the people,
Different
who
channels.
different channels. Yeah.
All right. So you've got some lessons learned from lots of
And
surveys.
yeah, and again, I won't read all of these, but and you'll get all this stuff, but um surveys need to be short, and it's not so much how many questions, but how long it takes. So we write these surveys, we all take them, test them, see how long it takes, see where people might stumble and try to fix that. Look for places where if the question isn't relevant, you can skip on to the next question. Um, so, and the big thing are the demographic differences, because like the previous slide, we want to see, is there a big difference in, say, use of a communication tool, or feelings about managers, or understanding of an initiative that differs a lot depending on where you work, how you work, how long you've been with the organization. We try to pick a couple of demographic questions that we think will actually matter to this organization. Not too many, because again, that kind of paranoia starts to creep in. People are like, you're asking too many questions about me
Mhm.
so that you can identify me. And I'm like, no, we're good.
Yeah, and I like the limiting the open-ended questions because I know being on the
Yeah.
analysis side of some surveys, it can take a lot of effort to read through all those.
Oh my God, you get and people, I mean, they're good because you get a lot of feedback. But yeah, if you have more than one or two, you're gonna takes them longer to do it, takes you a lot longer to read all of them.
It's another place where AI could jump in and do some summarization, kind of like the way they do the Amazon reviews now. They Most customers think
Yeah, yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. And focus groups are and talking to managers, we want the managers to really have, good engagement with their direct reports, whether that's a meeting or one-on-ones, or, some kind of regular messaging, perhaps over email. Um, and in a focus group, what we're trying to do is, with employees, to assess, are they getting what they need from their managers, and with managers to assess whether they're getting what they need from the leaders. It's this whole, cascade notion of the cascade. And if the managers say, well, I think I've got everything I need, but they have trouble translating it to their direct reports, that's one issue. It's also sometimes where they say, I don't have enough. I need more from the leadership. So when we
Mm.
do focus groups, it's just the idea is, it's maybe 10 or 12 people. So I always apologize ahead of time because I'm going to say, look, we only have an hour. I have all these questions I want to ask you. I appreciate all the conversation, but there will be times in this conversation where we're going to have to cut it off so I can go on to the next question. 15 minutes. Okay, we got to get to question two. I mean, I love all the participation, but you got to keep it moving because you got to get through the whole thing. Um, there are often wallflowers in a focus group. There's some people who want to talk all the time and will if you let them. And there are some people who are kind of shy. So I like to start with a little exercise where I ask everybody, for example, to give me a word. Give me one word that describes, how you're feeling about the employee communication you receive.
And
Is it
even an introvert can come up with one word generally.
one word? Yeah, it's fantastic, it's slow, it's, whatever it might be. And then those words start a conversation. You get everybody talking. We also, want to spend the focus groups asking, the why and what if questions. People say, no, we don't like that. You want to know why? If people say, we need something else, you want to ask them, well, what if we did it this way, or what if we changed that, and kind of get their feedback. We're trying to understand, kind of like with the sentiment analysis, trying to understand emotions. How do they feel about this stuff, so that we can make some changes that will be positive for them.
Yeah, and that's generally like people's emotions drive their decision making, drive their motivation. So you got to get to the heart of it to know kind of what to change.
Right. Right, that's right. And just on the manager's front here, here's some survey data, but you see that pretty good. 2/3 say that they receive the information they need, but of course that means that 1/3 do not. So it's not bad, but that's leaving a lot of folks out. And there's a decent number that are either on the fence or disagree with that. Same thing on the training. Um, in this case, only half say that they received the training, the support they need. That means half the managers taking the survey don't feel that way. They feel like they're not getting what they need, and we really need to help them. And there are a number of ways to do that. One example put an example in here from one of our clients, Children's National Hospital. They just created a newsletter for managers, and there's there's no nothing obscure here. But here's what you need to do.
Straight and to the
You know,
point with a nice
yeah,
nice bullet list of summary information.
yeah. Here's what you need to talk to your folks about. Just really clear. And for this particular client, we've done several audits over the years, and when they introduced this is one of our recommendations. We communicate with them, help the managers. The managers love this. And they're like, okay, never stop doing this. This really helps us a lot.
Right. They can get through it in probably under a minute or 2 minutes and get everything they
Yeah.
need. All right. Well, definitely that's why surveys and focus groups are still the number one listening mechanism. And now we can talk about what we could do with sentiment analysis nowadays. And Polite Mail, we're known for our email analytics, but we ourselves have really taken off in Teams. And we when we survey customers, we hear uh, you know what to do in Teams or how best to utilize Teams or how do we make Teams more effective. Like Teams seems to be a big thing with a lot of companies, but obviously doesn't work quite as straightforward as email.
And that's why I'm so glad that you've developed this tool, because what we're finding with the survey data is the feelings about teams are all over the place. Some people use it, some people don't. Some people love it because it keeps them connected. Other people say, I'm overwhelmed. There are too many channels. Michael, to your point earlier, there's a bunch of channels that maybe nobody's using anymore. It's hard to search to find out what's new. In focus groups, we hear a bunch of the same thing from people about teams. Um, that they say it's too much. I don't even check it anymore because it's too much. Um, I'm on a dozen different channels. I can't monitor them. Um, there there really needs to be some governance around teams. Teams is still a relatively new thing, and people like it, and it's really useful in so many ways. But it needs to be kind of organized or um, in some way so that people can know what's new, stuff they might want to point them to conversations they might want to look at, and to the point of Comalytics, they how are people feeling out there?
Yep. Yeah. So we looked at, not we have a small number of customers that are, I still call it Viva, but uh, I still call it Yammer, but Viva Engage is the right term. I'm slowly coming around to the rebranding, but they do have some sentiment analysis in there, so you can see by channel whether things are positive, negative in general, and then they break it out in terms of themes. And a theme is like a topic, and you can kind of get a sense of is it positive, negative, neutral? What are some of the comments? And you can see in here they're not actually hiding the names of people, so you can drill down into very specific comments that were related to that topic, and see how people are feeling. We don't use Yammer, but Teams, I don't know. I have a hard time differentiating between the two. I mean, Teams almost does a little more, but you get the Yammer style chats and channels, but you also get meetings and phone calls. And so, we use Teams exclusively, but um, and a lot of customers too. And then this, really what we're addressing with this tab is like, okay, we need to know, we need some way of scoring teams based on their activity, right? So is it an active channel? Is it idle? Is it inactive? Which, can be defined, but we have it defined as like, if there hasn't been any new posts or replies or responses in 90 days, that's probably a team that you could get rid of. And then with this kind of audit view, an IT person or whoever manages the team's environment could reach out to those people with the inactive channels and be like, hey, is this something you still need, or do you want to get rid of it? Or if they have a high enough IT authorization, maybe they go through that reminder process and then automatically remove it to kind of clean up the environment. But it can also, score teams by influence, which is kind of like, okay, how many members are there and how active, like what percent is the active to the total membership, how much activity, how many messages and replies are happening. So like if I want to reach an audience, if you need to post a communication to an audience, you want to know like, well, which audience has a good influence? Like, where am I going to be able to get this message through to a large number of people? And you can also get that sentiment score by team or by channel, right? Are things mostly positive? Are they negative? Are they moving one direction or another? So you can kind of see that change over time. So always comparing, like, you can set a time period you want to look at, and then we're always comparing that to the prior time period. So you can get a sense of the trending. And then this would be the kind of sentiment analysis view. So we can kind of chart positive and negative and neutral over that time period. This view is actually for all teams, for all topics. So it shows you kind of everything that's going on, and gives you that overall score. So just slightly negative here, but trending up a little bit. And you can see, what's the percentage of positive posts and comments versus negative. Does a little AI summary, and you can see in here, if you look at that real quick, you'll see that anonymized with a unique identifier, right? So we have a setting where you can either identify people or anonymize people. And that way, you don't have to see who actually said something, but you can say, what was actually said in relation to the topic at hand. And then we have the hot topics or trending topics on the side, and we kind of float up the most active ones here. So we've got, employee recognition, there's a acquisition or merger that's uh, got a little bit negative, and then, company news is positive, benefits information fairly neutral, right? So you can just get a general sense of what's going on. The AI system can uh, float up some topics, but then you can also set particular topics. But in this case, if we wanted to drill down into just that acquisition topic, right? So there's something going on, that acquisition conversation is negative. Let's drill down into this and see what's going on, and then you can see what the actual score is. You can kind of see over time positive and negative comments. Then we actually show, like, okay, which channels is this topic coming up on, right? So we can see leadership. Well, that one's green, right? So leadership is on board with the acquisition and merger. They're talking mostly positive about it. Managers, they're in that neutral category, right? So that's that same idea as your neutral surveys. Like, they could be swayed one way or the direction, but they haven't formed an opinion yet. And then in the all hands channel or the productivity channel, that's where, okay, we've got some negative conversation going, and you could kind of drill down further into those and see what's going on. And then usually when, communicators see something like this, right, you'd say, okay, we need to run a campaign or a program, right? We need to get some communications out there so that people aren't like too nervous or negative about this acquisition we're doing, right? We want people on board and excited about it. So we need to improve the messaging and get this out again to, like, okay, leadership's good, but okay, now we got to translate that to managers. We got to translate that to employees. Obviously, there's some people feeling nervous about this. They're not sure why we're doing it or how it's going to work. So you might run that campaign, whether it's email or intranet pages. You put that campaign out over time. You might have some keywords or conversation points that you want to make. And then when you rerun that same report for the updated time frame, so now we're looking at the last 30 days instead of the past 60 days, you can actually see if that campaign is having an impact. Right? You can see, are these words that we're putting out, are the talking points we're giving people, are those showing up in the conversation? Is it going more positive or negative? In this case, in the course of a month, you're able to shift the sentiment score up by 40% positive. So now leaders and managers, you can see that those groups are on board. All hands has shifted up to neutral. The productivity tips group, that they're still a little, nervous about it, but just shows you where you can focus your effort, and if the communications programs that you're pushing out in other channels is showing up in the employee to employee conversations.
Yeah. Michael, we have a question in the Q&A. How is a channel's influence score calculated by Comlytics?
Yeah, it's a, it's a good one. It's a fairly straightforward uh, calculation. So we're looking at members and then the percent of active members. Then we're normalizing that on it to get it to be a score between 0 and 100. And then we're doing a little bit of math because obviously you could have like a small team of 10. So you have to weight it by the size of the active, right? So you could have a small team of 10 where all 10 people are communicating. You don't really want that to be 100% influence. So you want a weighting based on, so even though, you might have a team of 2,000 people and only 1,000 of them are active, well, that's still 100 times the influence of your team of 10 that's 100% active. So you have to balance those with a weighting, and that's what
Right.
gives us the influence.
Yeah.
And it's important that we're doing active versus membership, because we see that a lot even in our small company, right? You can have the all company uh, channel, but it might be half the company is actually active and posting and replying, and so we're really using that percentage of, like, okay, what are the active people versus just the members. Just because you have access to the team doesn't mean you actually go there. It's not quite like email where you can't really measure an open in Teams, and you can't even necessarily tell unfortunately, at this point, unless you put an app right on everyone's desktop, but you can't tell if they actually saw the message. You can just see when they visited, and then if, of course, if they replied or reacted to a message, then you get, you know that they saw it, but you don't get quite the fine grained detail as you do in an email.
Yeah. It's just a really fascinating tool to me, and I just want to put it out there to the audience. If you have other questions about how this works, because I think it's a really interesting development for us as communicators. Come into the Q&A and post your question. We'll try to get to all of them.
Yeah, and we'll mention this at the end, but I'll just say it here too, is we do have a beta that we're kind of giving to customers currently. So there's no charge for it. We're just asking for some feedback so you can try it out. Some customers have had, a little bit of a challenge, like any app, getting it through IT and getting the permissions set. It's not overly complex, but it's just a set of checkboxes that, an IT Office 365 admin type person has to allow you to do. But with that, you can get this type of data, a version, earlier version of this is what we're have out there right now. And this is the view by topic, right? So the AI system can float up topics that it sees on a recurring basis, and then users can also put in a specific topic, like a keyword that they want to look for. Right. So I mentioned this one to Jim. He was a little skeptical, but one of the beta customers was like, "Yeah, I want to put in union because if we hear, if employees start talking about union stuff, we want to know, like we want to be in front of that, right?" So Jim
Yeah.
thought, yeah, what did you say? That was a little too much Big Brother-ish, but
Well, I mean, if you want to know that because if you're against having anybody unionize, you can use that information. So, this is the power of these tools. You have to be careful um, with the information you're getting and what you do with it.
yeah,
There's a
yeah,
lot
we
of
had a
responsibility with these tools.
Yeah, we had another customer that noticed like there was a particular region that they were lots of employees were nervous about a forecasted weather event. And they realized like, oh, here's an opportunity to get out in front of this and remind them of the systems we have in place to support them were this to come to fruition. So they were able to see that kind of trending topic come up and take some action to allay people's fears.
Yeah, that's an excellent use of it.
All right, so we
Right.
can wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, here are our final thoughts. Again, I won't read through these, but this is, all the things that when you're measuring, when you're doing an audit, these are the things we think about, little reminders. Um, and adding, sentiment analysis to the mix, I think it's a game changer because more and more Teams is becoming really kind of a dominant communication channel, and but we're not getting much measurement, from what's going on out there. This is a way to do that. This is a way to say, okay, here's what people are talking about. Here's what they care about. Here are positive trends. Here are some red flags. I mean, that is incredibly valuable if you're a communicator advising leaders on what we should do to, address employee concerns.
I think it could
Well, that's
help
why,
with your translation ideas too, if in terms of like, okay, we need to take this executive strategic information, translate that down to managers, right? Translate that down to various groups of employees. If you actually have, key talking points, like messages that you're communicating, you want people to adopt those and start using that same language, and you're going to be able to see that reflected here.
yeah,
So you'll know when that work is actually having an impact.
yeah, absolutely. Good.
All right.
We got some questions coming in, Michael. Let me see what we've got here.
Cool.
Um, would you have a good and effective resource for putting together internal comm audit surveys, uh, templates, and so forth? Um, well, we do these all the time. We do a lot of audit surveys. Um,
You gave away some
and
questions right in this presentation. There were some good survey questions in there.
yeah, some good tips, but be happy to talk to you more about that, or if you want to email me, my email is in this presentation. I think the one thing to keep in mind is you can have a basic template, but I think surveys, you really have to think about what the situation is, what's happening in the organization, what, what you want to know. We're doing one right now, for example, where there's been an acquisition. So we're really trying to get at how people are feeling about, overall communication as they try to merge the comms of one company with the comms of another. In some, audits, you're not in that situation, so you wouldn't be asking those kind of questions. But um, we have some resources we'd be happy to share with you. And then Hector here, Michael says, when using AI for sentiment analysis, is there a good way to systematically spot check some of its work to ensure it is accurate? Right on, Hector. Good question.
Yeah, you know, you'd almost have to have multiple tools to see if they align. Um, I think the library, the scoring, I think is fairly standardized in terms of, for English at least, what words have what, they kind of have a matrix of like when these words are used, it generally means this. When these words are used in combination, it generally shifts it one way or the other, right? So that's fairly well figured out, but in terms of accuracy, I think you got to have some implicit trust and just check it against your own comments. Like we've noticed some weird things of how it classifies. We have a QA chat, which always comes up negative because QA is all about finding problems and but some of the things that it was classifying, you'd read it as an English sentence, you go, I don't know, right? So you can spot check it in some ways just by digging into the details and see what it's classifying as negative versus positive. And then of course, if you have multiple tools, you can run the same data sets and see how closely they correspond. It gives you another level of confidence.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Hector says it best about spot checking. And I think, if it's telling you, hey, this is kind of trending negative, the best spot check is to dive in, go in there and see for yourself a little sample of what people are talking about and say, yeah, it is, people are concerned about this. So
Yeah,
that
and this is
finding, makes sense.
yeah, and with our tools, depending on what level of privacy you put on, I mean, you can drill down, from the summary, you can drill down to all the individual snippets that made up that summary. And then
Oh, okay. Yeah.
if privacy was turned off, you could actually go right to the Teams post, from there. But generally, if you just drill down to that next level, you'll get a sense of like, okay, here's how it's coming up with the score.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's the way to do it then. That's great. All right. Good questions. Anyone else out there before we close it up for today?
All right. And we'll reiterate our offer as we did on the last couple of sessions. If there's, something specific that you have questions about, we're willing to give you 30 minutes of our time to drill into your specific details. And if excuse me, if there's advice we can offer, we're more than happy to do that.
Yeah. Great. Michael, always
All
a
right.
pleasure.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim. We'll meet again. Are you at the Reagan event in Chicago early April?
I will be there. I'm giving giving a presentation on how to be a good editor.
All right. Well, we're doing a presentation on how to build a measurement program. So we'll see you there.
I'll see you there. Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Well, thank you,
everybody.
everyone. All right. Bye bye.
So long.